Do as I said or quit, the CEO dared. The single dad started packing and left everyone speechless. What could make a single dad calmly walk away after receiving an ultimatum from a powerful CEO? Why did his decision leave everyone in the room completely stunned? Hello, dear friends. We hope you have a wonderful day filled with happiness, good energy, and many blessings. Please give us just 5 seconds to share a small piece of your kindness with us by subscribing to the channel and turning on notifications. Thank you for being here and supporting our stories. Before we begin, tell us where in the world you are watching from and what time it is there right now. Now, let us begin the story. The morning after that quiet moment, the small town seemed to move at its usual pace, unaware that something important had already begun. Daniel Carter arrived at the old community workshop before sunrise, just as he did every day. The lights flickered above him. The scent of coffee with dust and worn leather filled the room. For most people, it was just an aging building where a struggling single dad spent his hours fixing broken things. But Daniel knew better. Every repair was a promise. Every small act of kindness was a choice. You always show up early. Someone has to keep this place running. You never think about yourself, do you? Daniel only smiled. He had heard those words before, but he never needed applause. His daughter Lily was the reason he kept going. Her drawings were still attached to the refrigerator at home. Little reminders that a quiet life could still hold beautiful moments. While others measured success by money, Daniel measured it by the warmth in his daughter's voice when she called him Dad. Across town, the woman he had helped the day before sat alone in a quiet office overlooking the city. Emily Whitmore looked through the small notebook where she had written down his name. She had met countless people in powerful positions. Executives, investors, leaders who spoke about kindness because it sounded good in a meeting. But Daniel had done something different. He helped without knowing who she was. He gave without expecting anything back. That kind of character was rare. Are you sure about this? Her assistant asked. He does not know your identity. Emily looked out the window, watching the city wake beneath the morning light. That is exactly why it matters. Back at the workshop, Daniel tightened a final bolt and wiped his hand with an old cloth. His phone buzzed. It was a message from Lily. Dad, do not forget you promised pancakes tonight. He laughed softly. For a moment, the weight of bills, responsibilities, and years of carrying everything alone disappeared. Then the workshop door opened. Emily stepped inside, dressed simply, without the appearance of someone who owned a vast business empire. Daniel looked surprised. I thought you were passing through town. She smiled gently. I was, but sometimes people find a reason to stay a little longer. The room became quiet, the kind of silence where people listen with their hearts instead of their ears. Daniel did not know the truth behind her name. He did not know the doors that would soon open because of one honest gesture. He only knew that someone needed help, and helping was what he did. Emily looked around the humble workshop and understood something money had never taught her. Real value was not displayed on walls or written on contracts. It lived in ordinary people who chose grace when nobody was watching. And before the day ended, Daniel would discover that the kindness he gave in silence had reached someone who had the power to change his future forever. The days moved quietly after Emily returned to the workshop, but something had changed. Not in the noise of the town, not in the old wooden walls, but in the way people began to notice the man who had spent years being invisible. Daniel Carter never looked for attention. He arrived before the first customer, turned on the dusty lights, and started working while the rest of the world was still waking up. The sound of tools moving across the workbench became the morning song of a man who carried responsibility with quiet dignity. You really came back. I told you I needed help. You could have hired anyone. Emily smiled softly. I was not looking for anyone. Daniel looked away, unsure how to answer. He was not used to people seeing him beyond his old work boots, his worn jacket, and the responsibilities written across his tired face. Emily noticed the small details others ignored. The way he carefully organized every tool. The way he repaired old equipment instead of replacing it. The way he stopped working whenever a neighbor needed a hand. It was not just skill. It was character. Outside the workshop, whispers began spreading through town. Some people wondered why a successful woman like Emily would spend time in a place like this. They saw money and status. They saw two different worlds that were never supposed to meet. But they did not see what Emily saw. They did not see a father who skipped his own comfort so his daughter could have a better childhood. They did not see a man who believed respect was something you gave before you ever received it. That afternoon, Daniel invited Emily to the small house where he and Lily lived. He hesitated before opening the door. It is nothing special. Emily looked inside and saw something far more valuable than expensive decorations. She saw family. Drawings covered the walls. A small bookshelf stood beside the window. A collection of handmade crafts sat carefully on the table. Lily ran into the room, holding a picture she had made. "Are you Dad's friend?" she asked. Emily smiled. "I hope I can be." Daniel watched the moment quietly. For years, he had worried that Lily would only remember the difficult parts of their story. The empty chair at dinner, the long hours, the sacrifices he never talked about. But now, for the first time in a long while, the house felt lighter. That evening, after Lily went to sleep, Daniel and Emily sat on the porch beneath the soft glow of the streetlight. The air was cool. The neighborhood was calm. "Why did you really come back?" Daniel finally asked. Emily looked at him for a moment. She could have given a simple answer. She could have talked about business, opportunities, or repayment. But the truth was deeper. Because most people are kind when they know they will be rewarded. You were kind when you thought nobody would ever know. Daniel lowered his eyes. He did not know that those simple words would become the beginning of a completely different chapter. He did not know that Emily was about to reveal a truth that would challenge everything he believed about his own worth. And when that truth finally came, the same people who overlooked him would have no choice but to listen. The morning arrived with a different feeling inside Daniel Carter's small home. The sunlight moved gently through the kitchen window, touching the old wooden table where Lily was finishing her breakfast. For years, this room had carried the quiet sound of a father doing everything he could with everything he had. But now there was a new feeling in the air. Hope. "Dad, are we really seeing Emily again today?" "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think she likes our house?" Daniel smiled. "I think she saw more than the house." He did not say what he was thinking. He did not say that Emily had looked at his life and somehow found value in places he had only seen as struggles. At the workshop that afternoon, Daniel noticed something unusual. A polished black vehicle stopped outside, and a man in a professional suit stepped out holding a folder. The customers nearby became quiet. They recognized the confidence of someone who belonged in important rooms. But Daniel simply wiped his hands and walked forward. "Can I help you?" The man looked at him carefully. "Are you Daniel Carter?" "Yes. I have something from Emily Whitmore." Daniel accepted the folder but did not open it immediately. He looked uncomfortable. "If this is about paying me for helping her, I do not need anything." The man paused. He had expected many reactions. Surprise, excitement, curiosity, but not that. "Mr. Carter, this is not payment." Daniel slowly opened the folder. Inside were documents about an opportunity to restore the old community workshop, improve the equipment, and create a training program for young mechanics in town. He stared at the pages, confused. Why would she do this? The man answered quietly. "Because she believes people who create value deserve a chance to grow." Daniel looked down at the papers. He remembered all the years he had worked in silence. All the times he wondered if his efforts mattered. All the moments when he chose patience instead of bitterness. The world had not forgotten. It had simply been waiting for the right moment to respond. Later that evening, Emily arrived at the workshop. The sunset painted the old building with warm golden light. Dust floated through the air like tiny sparks. Daniel stood beside the workbench, holding the folder. "You did not have to do this." Emily nodded. "I know." "Then why?" She looked around the workshop. "Because this place has something money cannot create." Daniel listened carefully. "It has heart." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The sound of passing cars faded. The old clock on the wall continued ticking. It was a quiet moment, but sometimes quiet moments carry the greatest truths. Emily finally shared something she had never told him. She had spent years surrounded by people who wanted something from her. connections, influence, opportunities. But Daniel was the first person in a long time who treated her like a human being before anything else. You reminded me that respect should come before recognition, she said. Daniel looked at the workshop, then back at her. He understood something important. A person's worth was never measured by the size of their home, the number in their bank account, or the title attached to their name. It was measured by the kindness they carried when nobody was watching. And soon, the entire town would learn that the quiet mechanic they had overlooked was the person who had inspired the biggest change they had seen in years. The transformation of the old workshop did not happen overnight. Daniel Carter knew better than anyone that meaningful things took patience. A broken machine could not be repaired with one turn of a wrench. A tired heart could not be healed with one kind word. Real change came quietly, piece by piece. Every morning, Daniel unlocked the workshop before sunrise. The same wooden door creaked. The same old clock ticked above the wall. But now, something felt different. People were coming in not just because they needed repairs, but because they wanted to learn. Can you really teach us this? I only know what. Experience taught me. That is exactly what we need. Daniel looked at the young faces around him and smiled. He never considered himself a teacher. He was just a father who had learned how to keep moving forward. But sometimes the people who never seek recognition are the ones who have the most to give. Emily Whitmore watched from a distance as the workshop slowly became something bigger than a business. It became a place where second chances lived. She had invested in companies around the world, built strategies, and made decisions involving millions of dollars. Yet this small room filled with the sound of tools and honest conversations reminded her of something she had forgotten. Success was not only about what you built. It was about what you helped others become. One afternoon, Emily walked into the workshop and found Daniel helping a young man repair an old truck. The boy looked frustrated, staring at the engine like it was impossible to understand. Daniel placed a hand on the side of the vehicle and spoke calmly. "Do not rush the problem." The young man looked up. "What do you mean?" "Listen first. Every machine tells you something. You just have to pay attention." Emily stood silently nearby. She heard the words, but she understood the lesson behind them. Daniel was not only repairing vehicles. He was teaching patience, discipline, respect, the same values he had lived by when nobody was watching. Later that evening, Emily and Daniel sat outside the workshop as the sky turned orange over the quiet town. The air carried the smell of fresh wood and evening rain. "You know," Emily said softly, "most people would have asked for something after learning who I am." Daniel looked at her and shook his head. "I helped because you needed help. That was enough." She smiled, but her eyes carried emotion. "That is what makes you different." Daniel looked toward the workshop lights glowing behind them. For years, he believed his life was defined by what he had lost. The dreams that changed, the opportunities that disappeared, the struggles he carried alone. But now he began to understand something deeper. A person's story was not written only by their hardest days. It was shaped by the choices they made during those days. The next morning, a message arrived that would change everything. A major organization wanted to recognize the work happening at the workshop. The town that once walked past Daniel without noticing was finally looking his way. But Daniel did not feel pride because people were finally seeing him. He felt grateful because the values he had protected in silence were finally being shared with others. And soon, the world would discover that the greatest success stories are not always built in luxury offices. Sometimes they begin in a small workshop with a tired father, an old toolbox, and a heart that never stopped choosing kindness. The announcement arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning, carried by a simple envelope placed on the front desk of the workshop. Daniel Carter looked at it for a long moment before opening it. He was not expecting anything. He had spent so many years living without expecting rewards that recognition felt almost unfamiliar. "What is it, Dad?" Lily asked, standing beside him with curiosity in her eyes. "I'm not sure yet, sweetheart. Maybe it is something good." Daniel smiled gently. "Maybe." Inside the envelope was an invitation to a community event honoring people who had made a lasting difference in their town. Daniel read the letter twice. He still could not believe his name was there. Not because he thought he was unworthy, but because he had never done anything for attention. He had simply tried to be the kind of person he hoped Lily would become. The event was held at the town center, a place where Daniel had walked past hundreds of times without anyone noticing him. But that evening, the room was different. Warm lights filled the hall. Conversations echoed between the walls. People who once overlooked the quiet mechanic now approached him with genuine respect. "Daniel, we never knew how much you were doing. You helped more people than you realize. This town needed someone like you." Daniel listened quietly. He was grateful, but he did not let praise change him. He knew the truth. A person's character was not created when people started clapping. It was created in the moments when nobody was watching. Emily arrived later that evening. She stood near the entrance, watching Daniel speak with families from the community. There was something peaceful about the way he carried himself. No pride, no desire to prove anything, just quiet dignity. When she finally walked over, Daniel smiled. "You came." "Of course I came." She looked around the room. "I wanted to see this moment." Daniel shook his head. "This is not really about me." Emily smiled. "That is exactly why it is about you." Those words stayed with him. For so long, Daniel believed his life was about surviving one difficult day after another. But now he was beginning to see that every sacrifice had created something meaningful. Every late night, every difficult choice, every time he chose kindness over frustration, none of it had disappeared. It had become part of a story bigger than himself. After the ceremony, Daniel and Emily stepped outside into the cool evening air. The town lights reflected on the quiet streets. "You know," Emily said softly, "I spent years building companies because I thought success meant reaching the top." Daniel looked at her. "And now?" She smiled. "Now I think success means bringing someone else with you." Daniel looked down, touched by her honesty. There was a comfortable silence between them. Not an empty silence. A peaceful one. The kind that comes when two people no longer need to explain who they are. Emily reached for his hand gently, and Daniel held it. It was a small moment, but after years of carrying everything alone, it meant more than words could express. Behind them, the workshop lights remained on, shining through the windows like a reminder of everything that had changed. Daniel had once believed he was just a struggling father trying to get through life. But the world was beginning to understand something he had always known deep inside. A person does not become valuable when others finally recognize them. They become unforgettable because they never stopped choosing goodness before anyone noticed. The days following the community event brought a new rhythm to Daniel Carter's life. The workshop was still the same place with the same wooden shelves, the same tools hanging on the walls, and the same familiar scent of oil and fresh wood. But the feeling inside had changed. It was no longer just a place where broken things were repaired. It had become a place where people discovered they were capable of more. Every morning, Daniel watched young mechanics arrive with questions and determination in their eyes. "Can we try this ourselves? What if we make a mistake? How did you learn all of this?" Daniel would always give the same answer. "Mistakes are part of learning. The important thing is that you keep trying." He never spoke like someone above them. He spoke like someone who had walked the same difficult road. Emily Whitmore continued visiting the workshop, but now she came without assistance, without business meetings, and without the distance that once surrounded her. She came simply as Emily. The woman who had everything the world could offer had discovered something she could not buy. A place where people cared about who she was, not what she owned. One afternoon, Daniel noticed her standing quietly near the entrance, watching Lily help organize supplies for the younger students. "You look different here," Daniel said. Emily smiled. "Different how?" "More relaxed." She looked around the workshop. "Maybe because here nobody expects me to be perfect." Daniel understood that feeling. He knew what it was like to carry an image people created for you. The hardworking father. The man who never needed help. The person who always stayed strong. But everyone, no matter their position, needed a place where they could simply be human. That evening, a light rain covered the town. The workshop stayed open late as Daniel finished a final repair. Emily waited nearby, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You know," she said, "when I first met you, I thought you were just someone helping a stranger." Daniel smiled. "And now I think you reminded me what people often forget. What is that? Emily looked through the workshop window at the empty streets outside. Kindness is not small just because the person doing it is quiet. Daniel did not answer immediately. He had spent years believing that his sacrifices were invisible. But maybe they were never invisible. Maybe they were simply waiting for the right moment to be understood. A few days later, the town prepared for the opening of the expanded workshop program. Families, students, and local business owners gathered together. The same people who once walked past Daniel now stood beside him. There was no arrogance, no judgment, only respect. Lily stood proudly next to her father. Everyone knows you now, Dad. Daniel looked at her and smiled. That is not what matters. Then what matters? He asked. She thought for a moment. That you helped them. Daniel nodded. Those simple words meant more than any award. Because children often understand the truth, adults forget. Recognition fades. Money changes. Titles disappear. But kindness leaves something behind. As the evening lights turned on around the workshop, Daniel looked at the people gathered there and felt something he had not felt in years. Peace. Not because life had become perfect, but because he finally understood his journey. The quiet years were not wasted. The difficult moments were not forgotten. They had shaped him into the person everyone was now learning to respect. The small workshop on Maple Street had become a place where people came not only with broken machines, but with unfinished dreams. Every morning, the sound of footsteps, conversations, and tools moving across the workbenches filled the old building with new life. Daniel Carter watched it all quietly from the corner of the room. He had spent years believing his greatest responsibility was simply providing for Lily. Now, he realized his journey had created something much larger. You built all of this. No, we built it together. You still do not see what everyone else sees, do you? Daniel smiled. He never wanted to be the center of attention. He only wanted people to have a chance. Emily Whitmore understood that better than anyone. She had spent most of her life surrounded by people who measured everything by numbers. Company value, market growth, financial results. But Daniel measured success differently. He counted smiles. He counted opportunities. He counted the moments when someone believed in themselves again. One afternoon, Emily arrived at the workshop carrying a small wooden box. Daniel looked curious. What is that? She placed it gently on the table. Something I think belongs here. Inside was an old collection of handwritten notes, sketches, and photographs from people whose lives had been changed by simple acts of kindness. Daniel carefully picked up one of the pages. Where did you get these? Emily looked around the room. From people in town. They wanted you to know that they remember. Daniel became quiet. He had never expected anyone to notice the small things he did. Helping a neighbor fixador. Teaching a teenager how to repair an engine. Driving an elderly customer home after their car stopped working. To him, those moments were ordinary. To others, they were reminders that kindness still existed. That evening, Daniel and Emily walked through the workshop after everyone had left. The lights above them hummed softly. The smell of fresh paint mixed with the familiar scent of tools and wood. It was a simple place, but it carried thousands of stories. Do you ever regret staying here? Emily asked. Daniel looked at the walls. Sometimes I wondered what my life would have looked like if things had gone differently. He paused, but then I looked around and realized maybe this was the life I was supposed to build. Emily smiled. That is a rare kind of peace. Daniel looked at her. What about you? Do you regret anything? She took a slow breath. I regret spending so much time trying to prove I was successful instead of asking if I was happy. For a moment, they stood together in comfortable silence. No expectations, no taitas, no difference between their worlds. Just two people who had learned that life was not about avoiding difficult seasons. It was about discovering what those seasons could create. Later that night, Lily found her father sitting at the kitchen table looking through the photographs from the workshop. Are you happy, Dad? She asked. Daniel looked at his daughter and smiled. Yes, I am. More than before? He nodded. More than before. Outside, the town rested beneath the quiet evening sky. The world had finally noticed Daniel Carter, but the most important change had already happened long before recognition arrived. He had learned that a person does not need a perfect past to create a meaningful future. Sometimes the greatest miracles begin with a tired father, a small workshop, and the courage to keep choosing kindness one day at a time. The season changed slowly in the small town, but inside the workshop, the purpose remained the same. Daniel Carter arrived each morning before the sun reached the rooftops, unlocking the door and turning on the familiar lights that had once shined over an empty room. Now, they welcomed young people searching for direction, neighbors looking for hope, and families who simply needed someone to believe in them. You never take a day off, do you? There's always something that needs fixing. Maybe not everything needs your help. Daniel smiled at the comment. He knew the truth. Some things were not about being needed. Some things were about showing people they mattered. Emily Whitmore noticed this more every day. She had watched Daniel transform a forgotten workshop into a place filled with purpose. But she also noticed something else. Daniel still struggled to see his own value. He could recognize the potential in everyone around him, but he rarely looked at himself with the same kindness. One afternoon, Emily asked him to walk with her through the town. They passed the small park where Lily used to play, the grocery store where neighbors greeted Daniel by name, and the streets where he had spent years quietly carrying his responsibilities. "Do you remember when we first met?" Emily asked. Daniel smiled. "You mean when you needed help with your car?" "Yes. I remember thinking you were someone who needed a simple repair." Emily laughed softly. "And I remember thinking you were just a mechanic." They both smiled because they knew how much had changed. The truth was that neither of them had understood the other at first. They had only seen the surface. A struggling father, a successful businesswoman, two lives that seemed completely different. But beneath those differences was something they both shared, the desire to be respected for who they truly were. That evening, Daniel returned home and found Lily preparing a small surprise. A handmade card sat on the table with colorful drawings around the edges. "What is this?" Daniel asked. Lily looked proud. "It is for you." He opened it slowly. Inside were simple words written in a child's handwriting. "Thank you for always believing in people." Daniel held the card carefully. For a moment, he had no words. Years of responsibility had taught him to stay strong, but moments like this reminded him why he continued. Later, Emily visited the house and saw Daniel holding the card. She smiled. "She knows who you are." Daniel looked at Lily's drawing. "I hope she always knows she can become anything." Emily nodded. "She already learned the most important lesson from you, which is that kindness is a strength, not a weakness." The room became quiet. Outside, the evening breeze moved through the trees. The world had changed around Daniel, but his heart remained the same. He was still the man who helped without asking questions. Still the father who placed his daughter's happiness above his own comfort. Still the person who believed respect was earned through actions, not appearances. But something new was beginning. The people around him were no longer just receiving his kindness. They were returning it. And soon, Daniel would discover that sometimes the greatest reward for a lifetime of giving is not what you receive, but the people who choose to stand beside you when you finally need support.